episode of Web3 Deep Dive Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Wolfson, and I've got Cami again in the studio with me. So she's joining us today and making her big appearance on the podcast. So today's episode features a really great interview with Dan Held. He's the GP of Asymmetric, and he's also a founding team member of Taproot Wizards. This is a really great interview where we talk all about Bitcoin security, Taproot Wizards. I mean, just basically everything about Bitcoin that you can imagine. Dan is such an expert and he's so knowledgeable. So we go through all of that in this interview, and I'm just super excited for you guys to watch it. Okay, before getting started with today's episode, I also want to take the time to thank Quai Network for letting us film today's interview in this beautiful podcast studio here in Austin, Texas. I'm so grateful that we can film here and do interviews in person, so big shout out to Quai and thank you again. I also want to take the time to thank the sponsors behind this episode. I want to shout out to Botanix Labs. You're going to hear more about Botanix Lab and what they're doing later on in the episode, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Okay, without further ado, let's get started with today's interview. Hey Dan, how's it going?
Doing well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to talk to you here in person in Austin.
I know us Austinites don't meet up as much as we should.
I know.
I don't go to the meetups much anymore.
Okay.
I've been traveling around to different conferences too much, so when I'm home, I just hang out with friends.
Yeah, well, I'm honored that you decided to come on the podcast today, so thank you.
Of course, thanks for having me. We've known each other for a long time in this space. I mean, since 2017, 18 maybe?
Yeah, so I got started in 2017, and I think obviously like you are one of the first people I knew of because you are one of the original Bitcoiners, right? Would you consider yourself that?
I'm not sure what that fully, contextualized means, but one of the earliest people in Bitcoin, I mean, back in the 2012, 2013 era, there certainly weren't a lot of us. So, yeah.
Right. Cool. Well, before we get into the tough questions, I want our listeners to know a little bit about yourself and your background. So maybe start off by explaining, who you are, what you do, how you got involved in the crypto space.
Yeah, so I've been in Bitcoin since I created my Mt. Gox account in December of 2011. Actually found the email for that. So sometimes it's so long ago you forget exactly what happened. So started to be curious in 2011, bought my first Bitcoin in 2012, moved out to San Francisco in 2013. And while I was out there, a buddy and I, his name was Kevin, him and I built the most popular mobile app in crypto called ZeroBlock. So ZeroBlock provided real-time market data, news feeds, charts, kind of like your Blockfolio, but for the 2013 cycle. And then we sold that to blockchain.com in December of 2013 in what was one of the first acquisitions in the space. And then I was the first product manager at blockchain.com. So I sort of stumbled and bumbled my way into tech. I studied finance in undergrad. And so me and a buddy built this app, and we were obsessed over solving this problem around market data and news in this new category of Bitcoin that we were obsessed with solving that problem. And it turns out that's how you build great product. So as a PM at blockchain.com, worked at another crypto startup, went to Uber headquarters where I was on Rider Growth and growth marketing. I was one of Andrew Chen's direct reports. Andrew Chen's a GP at Andreessen Horowitz and a legendary growth marketer and growth product guy in the tech world. So sort of built my career kind of like marketing, I would say, pedigree at Uber. Uber was a legendary place to work at that time. So this is 2016, 2017. Left there and then built a company called Interchange. We got bought by Kraken. So Interchange was like a tax reconciliation company. So we would reconcile institutional traders' trading activity across exchanges, on-chain, et cetera. So Kraken bought us in 2019, and I came on board Kraken and built out the marketing team from 2 to 30. Since leaving Kraken in July of 2022, I'm realizing how long-winded this is. I should
No, it's interesting. Please continue.
It's a long history in crypto, which it takes a little while to talk all the way through. After leaving Kraken, I started doing fractional CMO work, where I come in as a part-time CMO and lead different marketing orgs, and that's how we'll talk later about Taproot Wizards. That's my function there, to where I was one of the original team members and helped help them think through their marketing strategy and helping them go execute that. So I do fractional CMO work now where I'm part-time CMO at various companies. And then I have a fund called Asymmetric. Asymmetric is part of a bigger firm titled Asymmetric. The fund I run specifically is called the Bitcoin DeFi Venture Fund. So we focus and invest in the Bitcoin DeFi category. including companies like, we look at companies like Taproot Wizards and others. So for me, I've been in the Bitcoin DeFi world for quite some time. And those are my career titles. And then, of course, with my personal brand, I've built up a following of about 1 million followers over the last 7 years or so. So people know me mostly for my personal brand, but that's my corporate career, which is funny because typically when people ask me what I do, I start with corporate and like professional career rather than my personal brand side, just because I still kind of identify and think of myself as that.
Yeah, your background is so interesting. I mean, you've been in the crypto space for longer than most people that I know. I mean, I got involved in 2017. I guess that's the time when you were at Uber, when you were leaving Uber. Yeah, so crazy stuff that you've been in it for so long.
I mean, I consider you OG. You've been through 2 cycles now. You're on your third. That's a lot. I feel like people earn the OG status if you've done a full cycle, a full bull and bear market. If you've survived that and you've still stuck around, I think you get an OG title.
Right. And before this podcast, we were chatting. I mean, I told you I'm a Bitcoiner. I hodl. And I think hodling is a great strategy. Would you agree with me?
Well, of course. I mean, I'm for those who know me with my personal brand, like I encourage hodling and I encourage people to hold and believe that Bitcoin is one of the best investments in the world to have. When you look at, some people go, oh, that sounds a little too dogmatic, Dan. Like you're just an you're ideologically aligned with Bitcoin, and that's why you're talking about hodling versus trading. A lot of people in my replies will be like, well, why don't you just buy low and sell high? It's not that easy. As you know, these swings are really intense. And hodl was this mantra developed in 2013 where people were like, essentially Bitcoin is so volatile. Hodl became the rallying cry, basically behind just, I'm going to hold on to this investment, even though it's going to go up and go down quite a bit. And if you look at, Bitcoin's price in early 2013 was $10. If you hodled that to now, that's a 10,000x return. So yeah, cool. Maybe you could have day traded it and made that a 100,000x return. A 10,000x return is fine. Also, if you bought Bitcoin when it was $1,000 in the 2017 cycle, on the run up there, but before it hit 20,000, it hit is at like 1,000 at the beginning of 2017. You're still at 100x. I mean, that's phenomenal. So I think hodl is this really good, I would say, investment ideology that you can even port to existing traditional assets. You talk to folks like Warren Buffett or people who are very seasoned investors, and they talk about time in the market is better than timing the market. And I think that goes back to hodling as well, which is that just holding, like investing and holding for a long period of time, you're going to outperform the active traders in the market.
Right, definitely. I mean, it's great to know that. I'm going to ask you a question in regards to that, and then I want to talk about Taproot Wizards and what you're doing there. But when it comes to hodling, and I want to get your thoughts on this. So I've heard that some people would say Satoshi's original vision for Bitcoin was payments and transactions. So what are your thoughts on that versus hodling? Because for me, and I'm sure for you, I don't want to sell my Bitcoin. To think about selling my Bitcoin gives me anxiety. So what is this with this original way that Bitcoin was supposed to be used?
That's a great question. Yes, so a lot of people will grossly misinterpret Satoshi's writings and use that to champion a perspective. So for example, people will quote his white paper. In the white paper, there's not a 21 million hard cap. There's nothing about block there's nothing about how there's barely anything about how Bitcoin works functionally. People who singularly focus on the white paper and never look at any of his other writings, hundreds of pages worth of other writing, would be completely dishonest. It's like looking at the Bible and pulling out one chapter and being like, cool, that's the Bible right there, or whatever religious book you'd like to choose. So you'd have to look at the entirety of his work if you want to start from an ethically principled perspective of choosing to go, this is Satoshi's vision. And if you do that, Satoshi references Bitcoin as a precious metal multiple times, even talks about how pure speculation over its underlying value may singularly push it forward with adoption, that just speculation alone. He even encourages things like micropayments, which very quickly people realize were possible on Bitcoin. Satoshi was very permissive. He was like, this is a permissionless protocol. Try it out. If you want to pay for coffee with it, cool. If you want to store value in it, great. I mean, if you look at Bitcoin's value props, it's a monetary policy that's extremely credible. It's censorship resistant. So if you want to buy something illegal or buy something that's forbidden, it's a great way to do that. And then also it's really hard to seize. So it's like a Swiss bank account in your pocket. So when you look at the payments narrative and they go, well, Satoshi meant it this way, one, that's not true. Satoshi references Bitcoin in a variety of different ways of its functionality. And then you also look at, well, what do people want to use Bitcoin for? And people don't want to use it for payments. They want to hodl and store value in it. And that's a great thing. I mean, do we want to disrupt Visa and MasterCard? Or do we want to disrupt central banking and governments? Yeah, I think we know what the more important problem to tackle is. What's funny is Bitcoin will solve the payments problem, but at a much later date. People must first hold Bitcoin before they want to spend it. They have the chicken and egg reverse there, where it's like, well, you should spend it because Bitcoin offers, you won't be censored. I'm like, well, people don't really have that problem right now, and also they first have to want and know Bitcoin. If you're like, just use Bitcoin because it's censorship resistant, sort of misses the point of selling Bitcoin to people or selling the vision or the utility of it.
Right, yeah. We'll go back to that. Those were really interesting thoughts, but I want to shift gears a little bit because you are one of the original founding members of Taproot Wizards. So what is Taproot Wizards?
Yeah, I'm not one of the co-founders, but I'm one of the original team members.
Team members.
Yeah, team members, yeah. Udi and Eric are the two original founders. They've done a phenomenal job. Wizards are one of the most iconic NFT brands in the crypto space. So yeah, I'll give you a little bit of history of how I got involved there. Udi and Eric have been in the crypto world for quite some time. They've done a variety of different things. They felt compelled to change the culture of Bitcoin core development, where they wanted to encourage and foster a culture of making Bitcoin magical again and building on Bitcoin. So to do that, they came up with a crazy idea, which was Taproot Wizards would use memes in the form of NFTs to meme different opcode or different upgrades to Bitcoin, meme those into existence. And they've been somewhat successful so far. For example, OP-Cat or Quantum Cats are the first collection the Taproot Wizards launched. That one pushed and promoted the OP-Cat soft fork proposal, which would be to add OP-Cat back into Bitcoin. Satoshi originally had OP-Cat in Bitcoin, but removed it in the earlier days because he wasn't sure how it would work with the protocol, like if there's some sort of weird potential issue with it, which later on we'd find there's not. But Satoshi was overly conservative. So they had this kind of crazy idea to meme changes in Bitcoin, meme it into existence, and I've known them too for a long time. They're good buddies of mine. So I very early on said, hey guys, I want to be involved. Like you guys are, I think this is a really cool project. I love the way and I love how you're pushing it. The Taproot Wizards collection, which we'll touch on a little bit later, very iconic, mimetically touches back to a moment in 2013 in the Bitcoin world that I was a part of, to where like that really, to me, was a cool moment to be. It's sort of a memorialized history in a way. We'll touch on that a little bit in a little bit, but they've so far done a pretty good job of that. And I think later on down the road, they want to build more infrastructure or protocols that would help enable some of this DeFi and building on top of Bitcoin. So right now they're using memes to meme this into existence, and then later on they'll go build the infrastructure necessary to make it happen.
I see. So Taproot Wizards, these are NFTs.
That's right.
Ordinals, right? And they show the history of Bitcoin as memes.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool about ordinals, so how ordinals work for those who don't know, it's a meta protocol on top of Bitcoin, which means it's not a layer 2, and it's not actually happening on Bitcoin itself. Imagine if you and I are wearing augmented reality glasses, and this is the Bitcoin blockchain, and we're looking at it together. Our software in our augmented reality glasses, that would be the indexer that's running, the ordinals indexer, because ordinals stand for ordering, like ordering theory.
Okay.
Satoshis aren't really ordered, but we, based on our own subjective reality, decide that this is Satoshi 1, Satoshi 2, Satoshi 3, Satoshi 4. And then we subjectively, when we see transactions occur, we say, oh, well, that moved there, that belongs to Rachel. That one moved there, that belongs to Dan, even though the Bitcoin base layer doesn't recognize that. So it's quite fascinating. We're sort of like adding our own layer of interpretation on the Bitcoin blockchain. Through that, we're allowed to do really cool things like bring NFTs to Bitcoin. So when people refer to ordinals, they normally refer to NFTs. What's nice about NFTs on Bitcoin is that they're inscribed on the Bitcoin network, which means they're there forever. NFTs on Ethereum, they point to an IPFS file or they're a hash of the original image. So they're on Bitcoin forever. they also required a lot of money to inscribe them. To inscribe it means you're competing against all the other transaction fees in that block to inscribe your image. And so since images require a lot of bytes, and the price for a Bitcoin transaction is priced in bytes, it's a very expensive to inscribe a collection on the Bitcoin blockchain, which sort of weeds out the lower value collections that you could just, at the snap of a finger, create on Ethereum. For example, it might cost you $250,000 to inscribe your whole collection. So people usually bring more meaningful projects to the Bitcoin blockchain. And so there's a couple other reasons why they're really interesting compared to other chains as well. Like, for example, what Satoshi you inscribe the image on could be a special Satoshi. Like it came from the original pizza transaction, like the first Bitcoin transaction, or Satoshi attached to Bitcoin at once, these sort of things. So you can inscribe the NFT graphic asset on a particular Satoshi that's from a particular moment in Bitcoin.
I see. And how many Taproot Wizards are there?
There's 2,121.
Wow.
2121. Yeah.
Okay.
So, which is actually quite different versus other PFP collections. Normally they have 10,000. The last cycle, there was a common thought that you had to have a higher network effect collection for it to accrue value. The idea being that if 10,000 people own 10,000 people own a Bored Ape, that means that more of them will subjectively value it, and that there will be a bigger network effect around people talking about it and creating buzz around it. So 2121 was actually very controversial for a collection size, and quantum cats were 3,333. Again, the threes kind of look like whiskers.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't know.
So the Taproot Wizards they're often a little bit sarcastic and kind of whimsical with things. So with the 2,121, those were inscribed almost 2 years ago. So they were etched onto the Bitcoin blockchain a long time ago, and they haven't been sold. So people are very highly anticipating these being sold. And to give you a little bit of color, I think we didn't really touch on why wizards.
Yeah, actually, that's a great question for you, Dan.
we should cover that.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
The Wizards in 2013, our Bitcoin subreddit, we pooled our money together to buy ads on the other subreddits to put a Bitcoin ad. And the Bitcoin ad was this really, really bad graphic art of a wizard with a staff, and it said, "Come join us." And it said, "Magic Internet Money, come join us, our Bitcoin, come to our subreddit, come check it out." The worst ad you've ever seen, but it was so bad it was great. And so we pooled our money together, and I actually contributed to this. Like I pooled in some of my own Bitcoin for this, and we bought ad space. And so, the Bitcoin ad was running on all these other subreddits, and then we got a bunch of attention for the Bitcoin subreddit. And that sort of movement, that kind of like collaboration felt really cool. There's not many of those moments that happen. I mean, there were some of the crowdfunding that occurred when people were trying to pay for hodl knots legal defense. Like I contributed to that as well. But yeah, the Taproot Wizards harkens to that original meme of that really badly drawn wizard, come join us, trying to make Bitcoin magical again. And so that's how it all ties together.
I'm really glad you explained that, because I have seen Udi at events. I don't think Udi actually knows me, but he's the founder of Taproot Wizards?
He is, him and Eric Wall.
Okay. So he'll go to these events and he'll wear, like the wizard hats and the whole wizard getup, and I never got it. I never understood. I mean, I was like, okay, Taproot Wizards, but why is he wearing a wizard hat? But now with what you just said, it all makes sense.
It's to make Bitcoin magical again. And I think people have a lot of fun dressing up. It's just so different. You go to a Bored Apes, I don't want to talk too negatively about other NFT collections, but like the community vibes are just, people don't really dress up, and it's more of like trying to flex social status.
Yeah.
Whereas like the Wizards haven't been released. So everyone's just having a good time.
Right. And I did hear that the NFT, the party at NFT Paris was like amazing. Were you there?
I planned it and I was there.
Oh, so, wow. Good.
Yeah, I learned, what was kind of funny is I've never been an event planner, but with the Wizards, they're so iconic with like how fun the community is. I started to do event planning just for them. I don't do it for anybody else. And what's kind of fun too is we get to build wild and weird things that are just very iconic and different. I've been in crypto almost 12 years. Been to about just every type of party you could imagine. And so I wanted to create something very different, something like odd, transformative. For example, we had the Wizards party in Paris at a Gothic cathedral.
Oh yeah, that's what. Yeah, I heard.
It was. I mean, the vibes were perfect for that.
What arrondissement was that in?
I don't know the end.
Okay. I need to visit this Gothic cathedral. I go to Paris a lot. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was pretty
I
cool.
wish I was invited to the party. But anyways,
Well, if you
I
had been
missed
out
the
there-
memo.
Okay, well, next party, we're doing one. I actually can't say where we're doing one next, but we are doing one later this year.
Okay.
So, yeah, we had fun things. Like, for example, you had to drink the potion before getting into the event, which means you had to kind of buy into the cult.
Okay.
You know, which was, of course, it was just like flavored water. It's nothing alcoholic or anything like that, but fun things like that where you had to do it. If you didn't, you weren't allowed entry. Fun things like that. We had a portal where there's a very big guy and a thick door that he opens up and you walk through, and there's fog in there and it says join us, and there's monk music going on. So after you sign in, you walk through, you drink your potion, then you walk through this door, and then out the other side of the door, the curtains open up and you walk into the chamber where it's the Gothic cathedral. And there's a bunch of people in wizard hats walking around.
That's really cool.
Things like that. We had wizard magicians. We had a kind of a glass orb magician. I don't know if to call them a magician or a performer. And then we had, people really dress up. Like there's, if you see our promo video, there's people in full bearded wizard outfits with staffs doing like dancing on the dance floor. So yeah, we just try to make it magical, make it fun. And I think people really like that.
I love that because now we're seeing, Bitcoin and crypto become institutionalized. And actually, I want to get your thoughts on that. But when you go to a lot of these events now, and I mean, I remember in 2017 when I was it was me and Laura Shen. We were like the two women journalists at all these events. But now you go to these events and people, sometimes they're dressed in suit and ties, and you don't see a lot of the same, at least with the Bitcoin events. You see people really dressed properly versus like sometimes you go to the Ethereum events and people are kind of like sweatshirts and a little bit more fun. And so I love that Taproot Wizards kind of adds that fun element to Bitcoin, which I think we've forgotten about.
Totally. I mean, back in the earliest eras, like 2012, 2013, we didn't take ourselves seriously. I mean, we were magic internet money. We were a joke. Like Bitcoin was perceived, like I'd go on dates and girls were like, so what do you do for work? And I'm like, oh, I've got an app that's in the Bitcoin space. And like, so do you sell drugs or something? And I'm like, no. Bitcoin, it was a very unsavory thing. In Silicon Valley, it was not cool to be in Bitcoin at all in 2013. It was considered very dirty. Almost no A players worked in crypto in 2013. I mean, remember Brian and Fred from like Coinbase founders? They weren't prestigious at all. Brian was a mediocre engineer from Airbnb, like pretty early in his career. And Fred was a fucking analyst. Like he had just been an analyst at Goldman, and Brian brought Fred in because he thought that like the word Goldman looked good on the pitch deck. Like Brian didn't have any experience in tech. So basically 13 was it was whoever showed up to the ball game to play.
Right.
It was basically the group. And so we didn't really take ourselves too seriously because like none of us were like pedigreed or important or anything like that.
It's interesting, and I mentioned this on the last podcast with my last guest, who's Blake Benthal. He created Silk Road 2.0. But anyways, really cool guy, also a Texan. I got paid in Bitcoin for a little bit of my career. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, whatever. But I hodled it. I never sold it. And and I'm just so thankful and happy that I did get paid in Bitcoin because back then, I mean, it wasn't as early as 2013, but it was still early and the price of Bitcoin obviously wasn't what it is today. And I mean, I was just like, okay, yeah, I mean, if I'm writing about it, I should have skin in the game. Like this is the real deal.
Well,
but
you sound like a very rational journalist. Well, you were a journalist at the time, right?
Yeah. I guess I still am a journalist, but yes.
Podcaster journalist? I'm not sure. The lines blur a little bit, but what was so funny, and you remember this, a lot of journalists were like, I refuse to hold crypto because I report on it, which I find absurd. So many of the early journalists at Wired, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fortune, I knew them personally, and almost none of them have any crypto at all.
It's a shame.
It's a shame, and it was also like a bit cringe, where they were like, well, it's my ethical standards as a journalist. I'm like, bullshit, you have fucking dollars. Like, of course, they never reconciled that. They were like, oh, well, Yes, but that doesn't taint my perspective. I'm like, yeah, it does, because you hold the opposite. Anyway, it's like, can you report on real estate if you own a home or you rent? Yeah.
Right. I mean, I get what you're saying. I was lucky enough to be like I was at Forbes and I was at HuffPost, but then I was at Cointelegraph and now I'm at Crypto News. So I think that the outlets that are pure crypto, Cointelegraph, Crypto News, those are the outlets that you should feel like you have skin in the game.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Like if I'm reporting for the Wall Street Journal on Bitcoin, do I feel like I need to hold it? And then if I do hold it, do I have to disclose that?
Look, as long as you disclose it, that should be fine. But
Yeah.
most of them were like celibate. They didn't.
That's weird.
Yeah, it was super weird. And then you notice them revel in that purity.
Right.
Even till today, they're like, "Well, I've never had any." I'm like, "Cool, congratulations on missing the best investment ever in history, and you were in the middle of it
For sure.
for completely bullshit virtue signaling reasons."
For sure. So Dan, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin and what we're seeing now. So there's obviously a lot of this institutional interest. And I noticed that on your X account, you tweeted that Bitcoin is a great strategic reserve for governments, states, countries, but also for crypto protocols. So let's talk about that. What do you mean?
Sure. I'll cover the crypto protocols in a second. I do want to call out something about institutional adoption.
Okay.
A lot of people, and I've seen this in my replies recently, are like, Bitcoin has lost its way. It's institutionalized now. And I know this isn't what you asked, but I want to cover it just because a lot of people are asking. It's institutionalized. Like, does this mean that Bitcoin lost its ethos? And what's happening is Bitcoin has won. The biggest institutions in the world are bending the knee to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's code didn't have one piece of code change to allow institutions to adopt it. Bitcoin didn't change at all. Institutions had to change for Bitcoin. And I consider that to be winning. Like this is how Bitcoin was always going to win. And the idea that Bitcoin would never be adopted by institutions and it would just remain this kind of fringe anarchist movement was pretty silly. So I view institutional adoption as being like, this is incredible for Bitcoin. Now we have governments, companies, and protocols. So companies, you've got MicroStrategy. Governments, you have U.S. government pondering this. But of course, like El Salvador and others have already done this in terms of like building a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Protocols. So with some protocols, like proof of stake protocols, they can use their native asset as the staked asset. And that staked asset provides the game theoretic security to secure the network. You could have restaked Bitcoin used as the stake asset on that chain. So staked Bitcoin on another chain could provide the game theoretic security for the underlying security mechanism for that chain, if it's a proof of stake chain.
Are we seeing this today at all, or is this just something that you've thought about and it makes sense, but are we seeing that today?
It's a great question. Babylon is a big restaking provider in Bitcoin world, and I forget how many billions they have staked. It's in the billions of TVL staked. They just went into mainnet here a little bit ago, so it's just now happening.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about Bitcoin DeFi, because now that you're talking about staking and all of that. So, What does Bitcoin DeFi mean, and why are we seeing it kind of emerge now? I guess like last year now.
Great question. I've been looking at Bitcoin DeFi for quite some time now. When I left Kraken in July of 2022, TechCrunch wrote up my departure. You probably know Jacqueline.
Yeah, I do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
She's great. So she wrote up my departure, and I lay out my thesis for Bitcoin DeFi today. So that was almost 3 years ago. And it's a pretty crystal clear synthesis of what we're seeing now, which is that Bitcoin isn't just the biggest blockchain in terms of total market capitalization. It's bigger than everything else combined. If you were to unlock DeFi or unlock that Bitcoin that's just being hodled, and people could restake it, people could lend it, borrow against it in a semi-trustless manner, then that would be one of the greatest economic activities ever to occur in crypto. So like, just imagine a very small fraction of Bitcoin is used in DeFi. That small fraction could be larger than the entire DeFi ecosystem on Ethereum or Solana. And I hypothesized if that could happen for any reason at all, any sort of technological advance or with existing tech, that this would be the biggest opportunity ever to exist in crypto. January 2023, we saw that happen with ordinals. Ordinals allowed for other tokens on Bitcoin, BRC20 tokens and runes, and then you have ordinal NFTs. So those are like truly native digital assets that are on the Bitcoin blockchain. Like I said, it's more of like we observe it and assign that second layer or that meta protocol on top. We saw people choose to speculate in those crypto assets, those Bitcoin assets, and we saw that sort of DeFi economy emerge. And that was like an early glimmer that this could be on the right trajectory. And then in early 2024, the Bitcoin L2 narratives really started to become popular. And that's right around when we started the Asymmetric's Bitcoin DeFi venture fund, myself and Joe McCann. With the Bitcoin DeFi venture fund, we invest in Bitcoin L2s, meta protocols, dApps, and staking providers. So looking across that, we had this sort of blossoming Bitcoin DeFi fundraising ecosystem. A lot of L2s came into effect in that time. Right now, most of the Bitcoin L2s are kind of like how Polygon started, a federated model. But we believe that's okay because the market is okay with federated models. We don't believe game theoretically long-term that's ideal, but versus letting perfect be the enemy of good, we think it's a great start for now. And with things like OPCat, we could have trustless bridging to Bitcoin L2s, which would make the connection of Bitcoin L1 to Bitcoin L2s much stronger. So right now, Bitcoin L2s are a little bit limited. We think the main value for them in terms of execution will be in go-to-market via marketing rather than technological advancements, because there's not a lot. The design surface area for Bitcoin is pretty limited. But we do believe OPCat, CTV, and other Bitcoin software proposals have a very high chance of having consensus, basically coming to a consensus amongst market participants to where these could be implemented, I would say, in the next year or two. If that happens, Bitcoin DeFi activities kind of explode. So our portcos are well positioned for that event happening, but even if that doesn't happen, they can still go execute. But yeah, we're starting to see activity happen on these L2s, restaking providers like Babylon. We're investors in Bob, Mezzo, BitLayer. Those are big Bitcoin L2s. We're also investors in meta protocols like Arch, and a few others. So for us, we're really excited to see, we don't know how exactly what emergent phenomenon will happen. Will it be Bitcoin meta protocols that really get a ton of activity, or will it be Bitcoin L2s? We think it'll be a combination of go-to-market strategy plus a little bit of tech plus seeing how the crypto economic activities balance out based on Bitcoin's transaction fees. Ethereum, Bitcoin base layers will become prohibitively expensive over time, just due to demand and a limited block space.
Bitcoin has stood the test of time as the most decentralized and secure blockchain in the world, but it's been challenging to build upon until now. Botanix is creating the first fully decentralized Bitcoin chain, bringing scaling and smart contract programmability to BTC without compromising security. Imagine Bitcoin with EVM superpowers, fast, scalable, and limitless. The future of Bitcoin starts now with Botanix Labs.
Right. With Bitcoin DeFi, I think that there's a lot of buzz around it right now. I've written about the topic a lot. But when do you think we're really going to see it take off? In a few years when, things are a little bit more implemented and make more sense, technologically?
So I would say we're going to see probably an early glimmer this summer. There's a lot of Bitcoin L2 token generation events occurring. You'll see a lot of that capital recycled back into getting different dApps built on these L2s. And then you'll start to see those activities start to occur in a way that's really easy for consumers to go use. They've been building, some of these L2s have been building for years. So I think they'll be ready by this summer to where I think we could see a 2025 Bitcoin DeFi summer where I don't think it's fully baked and ready, but it's ready enough to support a huge amount of DeFi activity.
Okay, interesting. I can't wait to see how that unfolds. Just random question. Do you care at all about the price of Bitcoin? Okay, so for me as a hodler, I actually don't look at the price every day. I'm just okay, whatever. I have Bitcoin, I hold it. But what are your thoughts on the price of Bitcoin? Do you care about it? Do you care if it's up? Do you care if it's down?
For me, it's not about money. It's about a scoreboard of Bitcoin going up in value means that the world is subjectively looking at Bitcoin and saying this was going to be the new money. So the higher it goes, the more representative of that future world that we believe in is coming true. So at $10 a Bitcoin, not many people believed in it. And the probability of it succeeding as the new world reserve asset was low. At 100,000, that probability is much higher, much, much higher. And at 500,000 and 1 million, that number represents how much Bitcoin's price is reflective of it actually becoming successful. So for me, it's a scoreboard of not value, but of Bitcoin winning and becoming a new money.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess also with the new Trump administration, that's obviously been really good for Bitcoin and crypto in general. So yeah, it's exciting. Like the times that we live in now are really exciting. I'm sure for you as well, coming from like the beginning to now.
Well, it feels great that we're not enemies, like that we're not considered enemies of the state. I think the Biden administration was pretty intense and pretty negative with how they viewed crypto folks. Again, this is what winning looks like. Bitcoin's code didn't change. They're bending the knee for us. We're seeing the president of the United States openly talk positively about Bitcoin, whereas before almost every single politician was shitting on Bitcoin as like a money laundering drug scheme. So I think we've never been in a better spot for Bitcoin politically. Institutionalization of like market infrastructure is phenomenal. There's so many different exchange venues and there's so much more secure and robust than they used to be. People forget when Mt. Gox went down. That was 95% of trading volume. I mean, that was fucking dismal. We weren't sure if it was going to come back. I mean, it wasn't obvious if Bitcoin was going to come back. We thought, what if it took 10 years? The cycles hadn't been developed at that point. Like there really wasn't this whole like cycle idea. It was sort of like, well, that was cool. Bitcoin went to $1,200, but maybe it takes another 10 years to get there.
How did it come back actually? Like after, so that's like before my time. Mt. Gox is before my time. So what happened? Like how did it come back?
Yeah, so you had on the back side of the bull run, which culminated in the end of 2013, you had Mt. Gox collapse in early 2014, which was extremely negative. That continued, the price continued to decline over time. So from 1,200 down to 200, or like 170-ish, which I have a tweet from the very bottom of the market saying hodl at the very, very bottom because it was pretty fucking dismal, like about as bad as you can get. There was no money in the space at all. I mean, there wasn't one job at any crypto company. I mean, there's only maybe 100 people that worked in the category. It was very dismal. We weren't sure if it was going to come back or how long it would take. And honestly, there wasn't a catalyst at the bottom. Just enough people believed in it that eventually there's more bidders than sellers, and the price went back up. And then because there was some interesting catalyst in the 13 cycle around like, I think it was not Greece, but there was rumors that some countries, people were using Bitcoin as an alternative money. I forget, not Crete, I forget what it was, but it was back in 2013. There was some of those rumors. Some people thought that Silk Road was a good advertisement for Bitcoin, which is what's funny about that, because a lot of the payments narrative people will be like, well, Bitcoin wouldn't have succeeded without Silk Road because Silk Road showed how Bitcoin could be used for payments. And I was like, well, yeah, for payments that could be censored, it's great, not for a coffee payment. And then also I was like, well, last time I checked, Silk Road got shut down in October, I think October 2013, and the bull run happened in November. So all of that activity stopped, and then Bitcoin 10x'd and the user adoption 10x'd after the number one payments use case collapsed. So there's not much evidence that like payments actually drove Bitcoin adoption. I'm getting a little sidetracked here. So saying, for me, like the 14, 15, 16 was really negative. That's why I went over to Uber. There wasn't a lot to do in the Bitcoin. There wasn't any jobs in the space. The startup I was at failed. It's called ChangeTip. We were trying to do micropayments over social media using Bitcoin. And so we failed. And Uber was one of the hottest new tech companies up and coming. So wanted to build out process and learn about marketing and product at scale from the best in the world. And that's what I found there. It was pretty funny in 2017, at the end of 2017, I created Interchange, but I was still at Uber while kind of conceptualizing the idea. And 2017 was the bull run that went up to about $20,000. And when you walked around the Uber open office, almost every computer screen open was open at Coinbase.
Wow.
Everyone is trading inside the headquarters.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. Like you've always been a believer. Even you were at Uber, but you still had this like belief in Bitcoin.
Well, there's a Bitcoin chat room at Uber, and anyone from that era will know that I was in it and pretty active. And I was like the Bitcoin guy at Uber.
Speaking of Uber, have you tried these Waymos yet? I actually have not done a Waymo.
I was on the beta test for Waymo, so I've taken about 50.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you prefer them over Uber?
Yeah, pretty awesome.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna try them.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. I get free Waymos.
Wow.
So I've been right around free Waymos. It's a fun party trick too.
That's so cool.
For friends, also for dates.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, hey, do you want to go to the next bar? And I got a ride. It's an autonomous car, and everyone's like, oh my god, I've never been in one.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. I love the experience. I think Google did a great job on that. It's a little funny. It won't pick you up and drop you off at the exact spot you want to. It's like maybe 50 feet away. It's like kind of particular with where it picks up and drops off. It actually navigates intense, complicated scenarios quite well. 6th Street, 2:15 a.m., perfectly navigates it. We're talking drunk people stumbling around, cars haphazardly pulling over to let their friends in or pick them up or whatever. It just kind of carefully picks its way around the crowd in a way that you would expect from a human driver. It also pulls out, stops, and makes turns as a human would.
Yeah.
Like kind of not aggressively, but just it feels aggressive because it's just so human-like.
Yeah.
Versus like you'd expect it to run slow and be careful. It goes like a human.
Yeah. Well, I need to try it now that I'm in, because I was in San Francisco, but I was actually in Marin. So the Waymos don't work in Marin. They work in San Francisco. But now that I'm in Austin, I can actually use Waymo.
Marin's a beautiful place. And I spent 10 years in San Francisco. So
yeah. That's when I moved to SF. That's how I found out about blockchain, and then eventually about Bitcoin. But initially, my attraction to the space was the technology and using blockchain to track and trace for supply chain management.
That was definitely a 1718 narrative.
It was. It was huge. It was like enterprise blockchain, and let's go to consensus, and it was all enterprise. It was all about like the real world use case in New York.
In New York, I went to that
me
one,
too. Maybe that's where we met.
Probably. Well, I was just coming back into the scene. I'd been kind of gone for a year and a half working at Uber and just kind of doing my thing there.
Yeah.
And I came back, and ICOs were the rage, which was wild to see. And Consensus New York had a huge buzz around it. I remember where I was seeing Bitcoin hit $10,000 because it hit $10,000 at the conference.
Oh, it did?
It did.
I don't think I held it at the time.
Okay.
At the time of that conference.
I was at a party at it was Lower East Side. There's a the hotel is over there. I was it was a hotel party, like in one of their common areas, and I remember being at the event and just watching it break 10,000. So that Consensus has a very special place in my heart because of that.
It reminds me of Bitcoin Saturday. I was in Miami with my friend Margaret Rosenfeld. Shout out to Margaret. She's a lawyer in the industry. But we were waiting for it to hit 100K. What was it, December? Was it December?
Oh, yeah.
It hadn't hit 100K
It kept getting
yet.
close.
Yes.
Yeah, for like a week.
Yeah. So we were in Miami and we were like, we're going to do Bitcoin Saturday. When it hits 100K, we're going to like go all out. We're going to buy sushi and like, go
celebrate.
But it's so funny because like at the same time I'm hodling, but it's still a celebration nonetheless.
Yeah, but
it's
you
like
haven't realized the gain. Like you haven't sold it to like, so you're spending your whatever else you have, not the Bitcoin.
Fiat, I guess. Spending fiat.
Yeah. Well, that was it was funny about the 100K. So I was actually sick at the time I hit 100K. So like I'm like, yay! I'm like celebrating in bed. I'm like, yeah, nice.
But I bet you tweeted about it.
Of course. I mean, I was there second by. Well, I mean, we had to wait a while though.
Yeah, right? I know.
I think I was pretty. I think I saw it. I didn't see it right when it hit it, but I was like pretty close.
Yeah.
Because we've been waiting for a week or something, and I was like, please don't do it when I'm asleep. That would kind of suck. So I was awake. I remember being awake, but I forget when was the exact moment. I forget.
I don't know, but I mean, we can talk about this more. But I do remember I had to write a little news story about Bitcoin hitting 100K before it actually hit 100K.
So you have to be ready.
So it could be ready, and I was like skeptical. I was like, are we going to see 100K? What if this story never gets published? Is this a waste of time?
Well, we almost got back up there today, and then the Bybit hack happened.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
I mean, I think it's crazy.
Private key management's hard, and Bybit has become a major exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, they were kind of considered like scammy Asia exchange for a while.
Okay.
But now I'd consider them a little bit more legitimate. Yeah, I mean, hackers going to hack. Private key management's hard. Some people are trying to blame Ledger or other companies. I don't think that's probably the case. It was a very sophisticated hack attempt, from my understanding.
Why would someone blame Ledger?
Well, the founder's talking about how he was the last signer on the multi-sig and how he signed. And evidently it was a malicious smart contract because Ethereum, I don't know if you know this, doesn't have multi-sig natively. So you have to, versus Bitcoin has multi-sig natively built into the protocol.
Okay.
So private key management in a multi-sig manner for Ethereum, you have to actually use like a smart contract to do that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't hold much ETH, but I mean, I do use Ledger, and I think they're great.
Ledger's
I
great.
think they're great, and Pascal is awesome.
Pascal's a character. I love Pascal.
Let's talk about that just real quick, like how to
Sure.
keep your Bitcoin safe. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Got a lot of thoughts there.
Yeah? Okay. Let's hear them.
All right. Well, so first of all, the self-custody versus custodial is a simple decision of do you trust yourself or do you trust someone else? I mostly trust myself. So almost all my coins are self-custodied. But I still have a little bit in custodial solutions because it's my anti-suicide amount, where if I messed up my cold storage for any reason, which I haven't in 12 years, but let's say I did, I'd have enough to where I'm not going to jump off a bridge. So I even don't trust myself 100%, but I trust myself mostly, so I keep a small percentage on exchanges. What I self-custody, I have a ledger, and so when you generate the private key, you have the mnemonic, the backup, the 12 to 24 word backup. I stamp that into titanium, and then that's stored somewhere.
How do you stamp it into titanium? Does that, I mean, that's what I should do.
You can have a hole puncher that's pneumatic or a hammer.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah. Crypto Tag makes the best ones out there.
Okay.
They're a little bit more expensive than some of the other ones by like $30. But hey, it's your like life savings. You probably should store it in something really premium, really nice. It's like $150 for this package.
Yeah.
And so you can take these titanium plates and you can put it anywhere you'd like. Definitely do not keep them at the same location as your hardware wallet. If your house were to burn down, like the Palisades fires in LA, you could lose both. Now, titanium has the highest melting point other than tungsten. So titanium might be able to survive a house fire. That's why it's good to have it on titanium versus steel or another type of metal.
Okay.
Tungsten would be most ideal, but most people use the titanium plates. I don't like the other type of metal solutions. Some of them are letters. If that were to get broken or twisted, those letters could get jumbled, which would then scramble your backup. When you stamp it in, unless something sands off that surface, it won't erase that data. Like it can be bent and shot, and you could even shoot it, which Jameson Lopp has stress tests. If you're looking at which one to buy, go to Jameson Lopp's website where he stress tests all of them. Puts them in fire, puts them like in a furnace, takes them out, puts them in water, cools them down, sees if he can still read the information. So CryptoTag got A's across the board there.
Got it. So just so our listeners understand, if you have a ledger and you have your crypto on the ledger and there's a fire, for instance, and you lose the ledger, but you have that, you know, the 12 to 24
the backup.
The backup, yeah. So you don't actually need the ledger to access your Bitcoin as long as you have the backup. But how would that work? Like you contact Ledger and tell them, or?
What's tricky about the backup is that if someone finds your backup, they can take all your money, right? So your ledger, you got to enter a PIN to access it. The backup is, you know, it's the backup. If you haven't scrambled it or created a code with it, it's the raw. With that backup, people can that's basically your private key. So, if your ledger was destroyed, you would go recover your backup, and then plug those words into a new ledger. Mm-hmm. You never want to just have one fail state. You want to have like a backup.
Okay.
But you never keep the backup at your home, because if you did, if there's a disaster, earthquake, fire, whatever, you could lose it all in one go. So you could store it in other places. Some people dig a hole somewhere, which for metal backups, it's going to last forever. If it's titanium.
Totally.
You can bury a hole in the middle of nowhere, or in your family ranch, or your parents' ranch, or you could put it in a safety deposit box, or anywhere you'd like, really. I mean, as long as it's secure, no one else has access to it, and in a way where you don't compound your risk. I actually took a private key management class with Bitcoin core developers.
Wow.
Where that was pretty intense, where we played through game theoretic scenarios like nuclear bomb blasts, where like they were like, well, technically you shouldn't even have your backup in the same city as your device, because if there's a nuclear bomb blast or
that asteroid coming for, in 10 years.
Well, some things like hurricanes and earthquakes can destroy entire cities. The 1906 earthquake in San Francisco destroyed 90% of it.
Yeah.
So that would even destroy like if you had it, let's say, at a safety deposit box downtown, that would even destroy it there and at home. So some of these things aren't too crazy to even, or like Houston with the hurricanes.
Katrina?
Yeah. I mean, that was pretty devastating.
Was that Houston Hurricane Katrina, or was
that was Louisiana?
Yeah, sorry.
But
what was the one in
they had a
Houston?
recent one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was one.
So these things happen. I mean, Austin doesn't have any natural disasters.
Yeah, I noticed that.
It's
we
great.
just get cold winters every now and then.
Yeah, for
like
some
3
reason
days.
I just got back from Paris. For some reason it's colder here than in Paris, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
But fortunately it's going to be in the 70s next week, which
I
is
can't
also kind of crazy, where it goes
Yeah.
from 20 degrees to 70. But they also walk through things like, how do you set up your how do you generate your private key? Basically, I don't want to get too deep into this because it's a little bit too advanced, but randomness is a very hard thing to do. And when you generate a private key, the process of generating it, having a random number generator or having some sort of randomness or entropy introduced while the private key is generated will generate a truly random private key. If you don't, then the private key, the generation process, if it's formulaic, then someone could generate millions of private keys and then try to generate your specific one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, if the random number generator just always spit out 2, then everyone would have the same private key. Like they would always generate, basically you want to have as much randomness as possible. So some people recommend throwing dice and other mechanisms to generate more entropy when generating a private key.
Yeah. We should do a follow-up on that, because I've got a ton of questions about Bitcoin and security and about Ledger and all of that. I should even have Pascal on the show, actually. But
yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover there. There's
Yeah.
also recent kidnappings, and one of the Ledger founders actually got his finger chopped off.
yeah, I read about that. I
Yeah.
think Cointelegraph. I'm sure everybody covered it. Yeah.
At the Wizards party, we did have 6 security guards because we took that very seriously after
Yeah.
that happened.
That's actually, I'm happy to hear that you had all that security, because especially in everywhere, but I feel like you never know. Paris, I don't know.
Well, in
it can
Texas,
be scary.
in Texas, I've got my 7 guns.
Yeah.
So I'm,
As you should.
know.
Austin can be dangerous.
they're in my car, they're in my apartment, they're all over the place. So it's a little
Don't
bit.
mess with you.
in Texas, it's a little bit different. I feel a little safer.
Yeah. No, I feel safer in Texas also. I feel safer in Austin than I do in San Francisco. But anyways, that's another story. Dan, can you talk about some news going on with Taproot Wizards? Is that something you want to share with us on the podcast?
Yeah, I think I can. My comms person. Okay, she's giving me the thumbs up. All right. So, all right. So we Taproot Wizards. They were inscribed 2 years ago, but they have not been made for sale yet. We will be putting them up for sale. I can't mention the exact date, but as of the day that this will be published, the Taproot Wizards will be known as being for sale. So dates are still TBD, but a pretty big event. Taproot Wizards are probably the most coveted collection out there amongst all NFTs across all blockchains. So Quantum Cats, which are our other collection, they are the number 3 most valuable blockchain by per unit price across all blockchains up until about 3 months ago. So Quantum Cats were already wildly popular. It's the most valuable NFT collection on Bitcoin based on market capitalization. And then Taproot Wizards, we think, will probably be market capitalization. I don't want to set expectations too inappropriately here, but I think it will be one of the most iconic collections, and I think it will be the most valuable collection. And in this bull run, I think we will see it flip in Bored Apes or even Punks. That's pretty bullish. Again, I'm not giving price predictions. I'm not saying that this will happen. I've believed in the Wizards for 2 years since I started working with Udi and Eric. I do think it's super iconic. Again, all value subjective. Want to caveat that I'm not saying that it is going to be worth this much. I personally believe in it a lot and think it's a really cool project.
Cool. So if our listeners want to get their hands on a Taproot Wizard, how would they do that?
go to our Twitter account or our website. We'll have a banner up there talking about the specifics of how to go buy a Taproot Wizard. For people who are on our whitelist, which means they had to perform certain activities, certain quests to be given a whitelist spot, they will be given a special price to purchase them at. But to qualify for that, you would have had to do things in the last 2 years. So it's too late to do that. We will also have a mechanism for people to buy it if the whitelist spots don't purchase all of them. We'll have a way for people to buy it. The details will be on taprootwizards.com, and there'll be a banner there which will bring you to the Mint website.
Got it. That's exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah. I know we're running low on time, so do you want to let our listeners know anything else? Any other news or anything you want to chat about before we say goodbye?
Look, right now Bitcoin's ranging around 90 to 100,000. It's funny to see people feel this bearish. This is an incredible moment. Like, if we've spent so much time and we've gone through so much to get here, we're in an incredible spot in Bitcoin. I've never been more bullish on the ecosystem. So hopefully by the time this is published, and then people viewing this a few months from now, they'll look back and Bitcoin's going to be at 125, 150K and be like, oh yeah, it was funny to be bearish around then. So I think Bitcoin's going to be trading well above 150K by the end of the year. I think Bitcoin's never been in a better spot. And Bitcoin DeFi and assets on Bitcoin, I think, are going to be huge this summer. So look out for things like Taproot Wizards and other assets where I think Taproot Wizards will kind of start a momentum shift with the sale.
Cool. Well, that's great. Dan, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's your handle on X?
Yeah, it's Dan Held, my name.
Yeah,
and,
with the check mark, because there's a fake one of you too.
There's a few thousand fake ones.
Yeah.
I've tried to report them all, but yeah. Anyways, it's the @DanHeld, the real one. And then on web, it's just danheld.com.
Cool.
So danheld.com, you'll find my email and also my different social profiles for like YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc.
Awesome. Well, Dan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Special thanks to 4 Labs Digital for producing Web3 Deep Dive podcast. I'd also like to thank the sponsors behind Web3 Deep Dive. You can click the links in the show notes to learn more about each of the Web3 initiatives from these sponsors. Finally, thanks to the listeners for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and share.